So I'm delighted to introduce John Rutter, who's a deputy head teacher in Highland Council and has a considerable background in learning for sustainability in schools, to speak about the role of senior leadership team in enabling what you've just spoken about. Susie, over to you, John.
Okay, lovely. Next slide, please. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving up your time on a Thursday afternoon. So I'm going to rush through some of the first sets of slides here because some of it you have already been just talking about. I would just firstly, next slide, if you can, please, say that, you know, when we look at learning for sustainability from a senior leadership point of view, and when we're talking about it with teachers, I normally go in on two different aspects of it. There's the carrot and the stick. The carrot is more important, and I always say that developing learning for sustainability with our children is quite possibly the most important thing that we can do with them in a school. Obviously, you know, as a senior leader, attainment and achievement is very important because that's what we get judged on. But, you know, if we want to create a better society, then we need to engage with learning for sustainability. And if we do, then to be quite honest, I think if you've got happy, respectful children and young people, then good results do come from that as well. So that's the carrot bit, and then the stick is what's there on the screen in front of you, and that is the GTCS standards that tell everybody that this is part of their job, and if they're not doing it, they're I would hesitate to go as far as saying they're not doing their job properly, but you get the idea. Next slide, please. So one thing I would mention is, you know, this is something that Scotland is particularly good at on the whole. You know, there's a lot of talk about PISA rankings, and senior leaders, especially senior leaders in the government, take a lot of notice of PISA rankings. But apart from maths and numeracy and literacy, the PISA framework does include global competencies, and Scotland does pretty well on these. Next slide, please. This is a recent report from PISA that looks at global competencies across the world. So and it asks questions that involve critical thinking, which is great, actually. So this is a question about language, but there's also questions about climate change and lots of other things. Next slide, please. And if we look at the results, this is an example of a question about environmental sustainability and how pupils from across the world answered this question. And if you look over on the far right, you can see that Scotland does particularly well at this. Some countries are really surprising, actually. If you go deeper into the report, you find out that 40% of children and young people, it's S3 level. So 40% of S3s in Argentina have never even heard of climate change, which is I don't know. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the UK who hadn't heard of it, even you know, if they don't agree with it or whatever. But for 40% of a country not to have heard of it is I find quite mind blowing. But Scotland is good at this, but that's no reason why we can't get better. So next slide, please. So the role of senior leadership, what is our role in enabling learning for sustainability? Well, we have to kind of create the conditions whereby this can thrive in a school. Next slide, please. And when this is a similar slide to the one that was shown before. When we look at developing sustainable learning settings, you can see there that there are things that senior leaders that we have more control over than others. So we have a certain amount of control over the curriculum and how that impacts on our learners. Obviously, we have to follow a curricula that lead to exams, but the curriculum, you know, is everything that is involved really in a pupil during their school day. So it's not just the stuff that they get in the classrooms, although obviously that's very, very important, but you know, all the other things that they engage in as well. And that has a crossover with the culture. Again, culture is something that is very much within remit of a senior leadership team, not exclusively, obviously, because we all work in different contexts, in different areas, but we do have a certain amount of influence over things like learner voice, how we engage with the UNCRC and the ethos of the school and the relationships within it. Community. Okay, we have a community as a school, but the place of the school in the local community can be important, and especially when it comes to partnerships and how we can work with outside agencies around learning for sustainability and how we work with families as well. And campus. So campus is, some people have, some senior leadership teams have more control over what goes on in their campus than others. And I at the moment, I'm in a school that's not owned by Highland Council. It's a PP. I can't remember if it's a PPF or a PPP school, but you know the ones that I mean, which is lovely from a point of view of keeping the building in a really nice condition, but is not always that great if you want to do things and you're not allowed to do them, or you have to pay heavily to do so. So there are things that we have control over. We don't have a great amount of control over school transport. We don't have a great amount of control over the water and the energy use in the school. Obviously, there are things that we can do to reduce this, but these things are more tricky. And school grounds as well. Again, some schools have better grounds than others and more facilities for kind of engaging with learning for sustainability. I'd say in Highland, we're pretty lucky because most of our schools have a certain amount of land around them. But I know, down in the Central Belt, that's not always the case. Next slide, please. So that's about how senior leadership can get involved, but where staff are concerned, when you start talking about learning for sustainability, there are several kind of common tropes that come forward, such as there's not enough time, there are too many initiatives. A lot of people say we're doing that already, which is good, and a lot of people in a lot of schools are doing a lot of stuff with learning for sustainability, but it kind of works in silos, as especially in secondary schools, as a lot of things can do, and will be specific to departments and subjects, and developing a holistic view on it is a bit more important. So we have rights respecting school. So this is, I was at a Learning for Sustainability Mentors meeting earlier in the week, and one thing that is of concern, and I have to be slightly careful what I say here, because I don't want to come over as feeling as if rights respecting schools isn't important, because it is. But rights respecting school is an award, and learning for sustainability is an ethos and a culture change. And the two things don't always marry up. And a lot of senior leadership teams around the country have got really, really on board with rights respecting schools, because you can go bronze, silver, gold, and you can show progression, and you can show how well you're doing with addressing the UNCRC. However, I would always contend, and I know other people who do as well, that rights respecting school is just a small part of learning for sustainability, and should probably be seen as a small part of learning for sustainability without diminishing its importance. So nobody wants to take a lead on it, especially amongst staff, because staff are very busy. So if you are going down a learning for sustainability route in a school, really needs to be on a depute's remit, I would say, to ensure that there is some action taken on various initiatives to go forward. And we're judged on attainment and results, which is very true. As I said before, I think a school culture of respect and sustainability does lead to good results, although it's fairly ephemeral and difficult to note. But it is also, as was said before, HMI are interested in what is going on. We were inspected back in January this year, and while it is not again, I would say it should form part of what schools are judged on during inspections, but it doesn't at the moment. But I sought out one of the inspectors, asked who was particularly keen on for learning for sustainability, and it was a fairly big inspection team, and they had somebody who was, and they were very interested in the stuff that was going forward in the school. And so it did merit a mention in the inspection report, or it will do when the inspection report comes out. It's not a big mention, it's a 26-page report, and I think it comes down to about 2 or 3 lines, but it's good to see that it is in there and that people are taking notice. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a wee bit about the way that we approached developing a learning for sustainability policy at Culloden Academy, which is where I was before here. Because the head teacher there was very keen to start looking towards learning for sustainability and having a specific learning for sustainability policy. I went away and searched around the internet and for schools that had a learning for sustainability policy, and I couldn't find many of them. I found one which is reasonably local to us. I found another one in the Central Belt, but it hadn't been updated since 2019. So there may be policies out there, but there aren't many of them. And you know, I'm not a great lover of policies, especially if they're more than one side of A4. But I think in this case, it's good to have something that you can hang your hat on. So developing a learning for sustainability policy doesn't need to be too onerous and is, I would say, a good idea and a good step forward. So how do we do it? Next slide, please. First step was looking at pupil participation, because if the kids aren't interested, then you're not going to get anywhere with this. So I had a look at reports that were out there and talked to pupils, especially through the Pupil Council, but not exclusively, about things that were going on with learning for sustainability. This report was published by the Scottish Government, I think it was last year, and it came up with a few recommendations or priorities. One that was that standardized terminology is quite important when you're looking at learning for sustainability, because different subjects talk about things in different ways. So part of the policy was that we came up with a draft glossary around learning for sustainability. Pupils wanted learning for sustainability integrated through the curriculum, not just taught in geography and science lessons. Everybody wants more outdoor learning. And they want consultation on working with people outside their school as well. Next slide, please. So I took this a little bit further, and what we did was working with the pupil councils. We asked them to identify the big issues that they think are facing the world today, how they would like the world to be in 2030, how they want their school and community to look in 2030, and what they're passionate about that they would like to see change. Next slide, please. And next slide. So we did an exercise with pupils, and later on we did it with staff as well to identify what the big issues are. I need to hold my hand up because I nicked these slides off Keith at Speyside Grammar, who's really big on learning for sustainability, and took some of his ideas from there. So we looked at what are the big issues. Next slide, please. And pupils identified these by doing just a little exercise, looking at the big issues impacting the world. And next slide. And then how they wanted the world to be in 2030, and how they wanted their school and community to look. So next slide. Yeah, and then there was just a final thought at the end. Okay, next slide. And some of the results that came back were pretty interesting. So in Culloden, pupils identified these issues as being the main concerns. And they all, come under the banner of learning for sustainability. So equality and respect, the need for a greater appreciation of environmental issues and sustainable living, a desire for teaching on political systems. So some of these things, come down to being quite they can be quite subject specific, but they don't necessarily have to be. But you know, that was quite an interesting one, and made us go away and think more about our modern studies curriculum in particular. Recycling, littering and pollution, and poverty and the cost of living. Now, it should be said these are all a snapshot, obviously, because they have to they were just things that were uppermost in pupils' minds at the time. And you know, different things come along all the time. So if you are devising a policy, and I'll come back to more of this later, you do have to kind of revisit it and on an annual basis, just to make sure that concerns don't change. Next slide, please. So we did the same exercise with our teachers and staff. And staff were concerned with these things: housing, poverty and economic inequality, global warming, pollution. You know, some of these are quite similar to what pupils came up with. The rise of the far right and everything that comes with that. Kindness, nurture and respect, and food and water shortages. Okay, next slide, please. So where did we go from here? So the first thing, we did a big issues exercise, as I just said, and we did some awareness raising with staff and got them to think about the issues. We then took that to departments through an audit. You know, everyone loves an audit, but there's quite a, if you go to the next slide, sorry, there is quite a decent one under this document, which comes from Education Scotland. And when I say decent, I mean short. And it gets people to think about the issues, but it's not too onerous. Next slide, please. You can see, for instance, you know, it looks at leadership and management and self-evaluation. There are focused questions on what we need to do, what the curriculum is, and how we raise attainment, and how these all relate to sustainability. And departments completed these as part of their just one. I think, did we do it in the DM? We might have done it through DMs, or we might have done it at an inset day. But it doesn't take long. You know, it was no more than an hour out of people's day when they were doing some collegiate work anyway. Next slide, please. Okay, so we did the audit. We looked for enthusiastic but non-preachy early adopters. So if you start nagging people about learning for sustainability, they will start to switch off. But we did have lots of people who were quite enthusiastic about this, and brought them all together from different departments as well. And everybody said, right, well, we need to do something, but we need to make it as easy as possible for staff. And I said, yeah, we do. And we also need to highlight, going back to my carrot and stick, the importance of LfS from a societal standpoint, but also as part of what it means to be a teacher in Scotland. So for a first point, what we did was used the global goals to embed LfS, because we thought this is a good way in which we can relate all our teaching in the school to some kind of learning for sustainability. So next slide, please. I trust I am preaching to the converted with this slide, and everybody knows pretty much what the golden goals here, what they are. So the starting point for us was to display these in classrooms, and to say to teachers, okay, we don't want you to modify your teaching. We don't want you to unless you really want to, or to go all out with new initiatives under these various different headings. But when you are talking about these things in class, any of these issues, relate them to the global goals. Say what the global goals are all about, that they have targets attached to them for 2030, above all to end extreme poverty, address inequality, and fix climate crisis. And when you're talking in classes, just relate whatever you're doing. You just mention it and say, and this fits in with this on the golden global goals. And some departments got on with this really early, and they started adjusting their lessons so that any PowerPoints that they had, they started affixing a little global goal symbol in the bottom of their PowerPoint, which was brilliant. But like I say, we didn't want to make everybody do that unless they were comfortable with it, because we didn't want to cause lots of extra work. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, that's a repeat. Next slide, please. Apologies. So following all that, we came up with a policy which looks like this. Can we show the policy? And I will just briefly run through what kind of stuff's in it. That would be brilliant. Okay, back to the top. So if you can scroll through this slowly, and I will just talk a wee bit as we go. So yeah, we started off with the rationale, looked at the school values and how they relate to learning for sustainability. Introductory sentence, taking on board what pupils had said and what teachers had said through the exercise that we did with them, and also there's a bit in here about parents as well, because we talked to parents about what was going on with learning for sustainability, and they were all on board. And there's a bit there about what senior leaders are going to do. So in the school, they will help create the conditions whereby our pupils develop their knowledge of learning for sustainability, etc. So we put in the Higgios 4 quality indicators, just so people were aware about how this relates to Higgios 4. Yep, keep going. Included some stuff about policies and national guidelines so that people could go and have a look at these things if they were interested in more detail. Okay, keep going. And then we came down to the aims of our policy. So there's a bit in there about people knowing their GTS standards. I've included a bit about pupil participation from the report that I looked at, told you about earlier. Keep going. Okay, and then there's a bit there about talking to pupils and about what pupils wanted from their learning for sustainability policy. A little bit about parent participation, and then the bit at the bottom about how we put it into practice. So there are two definitions there. There is a definition from which is a nationally recognised definition for learning sustainability, and then what that meant in the context of Culloden Academy, taking account of the exercises that we did with the pupils and staff. Had to put in the global goals, of course, so that everybody knows what we're talking about here, and talked about how that was going to be people were going to relate to that in the teaching. We also put in some stuff about cost of the school day, because that we figure that comes on, that's very important under learning for sustainability, and some stuff there on the UN CRC and rights respect in schools. And then at the end, keep going down. Yeah, we did outdoor learning, and then I put in this bit about decolonizing the curriculum, because I think I personally, as a geography teacher and as somebody who's interested in these things, I think decolonizing the curriculum is really, really important. But that is going to be a long, slow process. So I put it in just to mention it, and then we'll see where we go from there. And then at the end, I think, yeah, there was just some more stuff there about how we can support colleagues through CLPL. And we are lucky up in Highland that we have Highland One World, which is our development education charity, who are very good at supporting us on all this. Okay, can we get rid of that and go back to the PowerPoint? I don't think there's too much more to go, but there's a couple of slides. Okay. Right, next slide. So the timeline that we released this draft policy to staff. We visited departments to talk through the draft policy and to answer questions, and then we shared it with pupils and parents for comment, finalised the policy, and then we had a big inset day with learning for sustainability activities going on, and food, because that's always a winner. Gets people do it in summer if you're going to have an inset day about learning for sustainability, because you can do a load of stuff. We had different teachers giving us ideas about how they do outdoor learning in their lessons, for instance. and that was done again. Senior leadership role there is partly coercion and partly flattery. So approaching people who you know are going to be good, and people who would not normally want to come forward, but do good stuff, and telling them how great they are, and getting them to be involved. And it was really successful, I have to say. Next slide, please. So next steps for us would be, whoever, there is somebody who's taken on. This is one thing you do have to be aware of with learning for sustainability, that is, if your evangelical member of staff leaves, you need somebody who is going to take it on afterwards. I was lucky with Culloden because it is now firmly a part of a depute's remit, but also there are principal teachers who are very keen on it. So revisit the policy each year. How are people, you can find out how pupils are engaging with the global goals, how are staff engaging, and are these global goals, for instance, embedded in teaching? Have the pupil priorities changed? Policies should be a working document, so go back, revisit the exercise that you have done before, and see if there are new things that are coming up that you should be including in the curriculum. I dare say that just what's going on over the Atlantic at the moment, that if you talk to kids and young people about it now, they would probably want to know more about that what's happening over in the States. We were going to look at through, especially in secondaries, primaries, you do this anyway. I think you're pretty good at this from my own kids' experience, but look for opportunities for interdisciplinary learning. Support, again, for senior leadership teams, you can support and challenge staff through the use of the PRD system. So ask questions of staff about how they're engaging with learning for sustainability when you are doing annual reviews. More involvement in outdoor learning is always good, and ultimately you need to look at what has changed altogether under these 4 C's for learning for sustainability. And that's me. Bang on time, I think. Thank you.
Bang on time, John, and you have managed to fit so much into really quite a short time, and in such a practical and really engaging way. So thank you very much for sharing your experience on that. And I think the process, but that idea that this is actually a journey, and that it's a bit of a never-ending process because you're constantly revisiting and developing and moving forward is great, I think.